Okay, thank you, John. Nice to be back. Thank you to the ISJ, and thank you to all of you for still being here. I'm impressed. The room is still very full. I am very, very privileged to be surrounded on this next panel by some very experienced people from very different parts of the business. I am not going to waste time introducing them. You can see them here. I'm going to welcome them up onto the stage. And as you'll see from your program, we're going to be talking about who is truly keeping us safe. So welcome to the panel. Okay, I'm going to give a shout out to Jude from Google because we were chatting earlier and she said, Sarah, the best thing about a talk is when you give an example of something. So I'm going to give an example. How many people in this room have heard, oh, Sarah, don't worry about the security. I know what I'm doing. I grew up there. Oh, why do you keep following me everywhere I travel? So I'm going to start with Egle here. And we caught up last week and we were just talking about as businesses continue to grow, we are moving our businesses into more and more diverse environments, countries, the geopolitical risks, not just geopolitical, the travel, the attitudes of our staff. So Egle, turning to you first, post-COVID, COVID seems a long time away, but how have you seen attitudes of your staff change since COVID has finished?
Yeah, so, oh wow, it's a bit loud, sorry. So what happened, what we see in organizations, they allow for more flexible working, right? And one of the programs that have stayed is seen as a really good perk for employees is allowing them to work from other countries, right? It's a great perk and it may not impact so much their safety because they're usually going to work from the home countries where they are based, like to visit their families, extend their trip. But the question is, who's responsible for their safety, right? It is not a business trip. We're not sending them out there on business. They're asking us, can they go and work from these countries for extended period of time, yet they are conducting business. So we see some of the organizations, they have clear policies that says, you're going there, you're on your own, you have to have your own insurance, all your benefits stop, but does it work in practice? Employees usually don't know this. They don't read that far out in the policy as well. So legally, if something does happen, you might be able to get away and say, hey, we've got this really nicely written policy that says, you have to get your own insurance, you're responsible for your own safety and well-being. But think about the reputational implications, right? And people notice when you leave someone behind, and especially in more fragile regions like ours, every decision echoes louder. So how you respond becomes part of your brand. So I guess my question is, can we afford not to have that duty of care for those employees? And it's a question yet to be answered. I don't have an answer for this. It's an open question for the audience as well. If anyone has an answer to this, please feel free to connect. But I'm yet to see a very clearly defined policy and procedure that works both on paper and in practice.
Yeah, so the duty of care bit raises a really good point. I'm going to pass down to Mike at the end here very quickly. So Mike's been furiously on the phone, which I think a lot of you obviously have. We heard earlier about the Pakistan-India challenges this morning and overnight, and I've seen this man moving on his phone very quickly today. You say duty of care, Mike. Just give us some of your insights on where does that duty of care start and stop, and what's the direction getting from the C-suite level?
Yeah, similar to Egle, I think a lot of us in this room have similar challenges post-COVID with what used to be a very straightforward duty of care. In other words, we sent you there on a business trip, we're responsible for you, has now become very gray. So that's become ambiguous. And what I often find is when it comes to these work from elsewhere or kind of blended leisure trips, I'm actually, as an example, tonight or next week, I'm heading off to the US for the OSAC MENA conference. That's work. Then I'm going to visit my family for a week while I'm home, and then I'm going to a sponsorship event in Europe and then returning to Dubai. And this is very indicative of how business is operating now with the flexibility. So where is the company's duty of responsibility, duty of care start and end? And as Egle said, I think a lot of organizations, mine included, you've seen a lot of confusion around it. MasterCard is very much a people-centric people culture. We care about our people. So the inclination from the regions and various regions globally or even global is to take care of our people no matter what. But as companies grow and expand, MasterCard's grown 4x since 2010. We have 40,000 employees now. We used to have only like 300 employees in Dubai. We now have 1,800 in the region. just to give you the example of the growth, is that really feasible to be able to provide a response to people who are going and choosing to work from a location that the company didn't send them for? So what I really like to see is more of a clearly defined policy that's adhered to, that everybody agrees upon from the executive level on down. So there's a lot of confusion in our company, I think, around that, based on the culture and what's happened historically and what we're faced with now.
So just to add to what Mike said, I think, yes, you can have a very nicely written policy and say like the whole responsibility is on you, you're on your own whilst you're doing this, you ask for it. But if someone comes and asks you for help and you turn them away, that reputational damage is bigger than any legal one, in my opinion.
And you raise a good point. So what can be small, can be put into social media. We've all experienced, we're talking about insider threats and how members of staff can come unhappy, and social media has become our best friend and our worst enemy at the same time. But it's also about the trust in the security department. And I think that's probably another big thing is if somebody's coming to ask you for help, we may sometimes be seen as the frustrator, but we're also the last port of call. We are as a very trusted colleague of mine says, we are the Swiss Army knife of an organization. When everything goes wrong, everyone comes to us and they want us to solve that problem. As we've seen the generations change, moving to Nabia here, in the intelligence space, we are trying to be consistent. Mike said that he has grown 4 times the staffing power, workforce is getting bigger, it's getting more diverse than where it is. How are you seeing the risk changing to the security provisions that we're able to give globally to our staff?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that more and more businesses are now expanding in geopolitically very fragile regions. So unfortunately, what I would add on is that security cannot be standardized around all of the globe. It is very location-specific phenomena. So when we move and these businesses and operations move into these fragile areas, we can see that there emerges a 2-tiered system of security, where the flagship stores or the headquarters can have greater security protocols in place, which are impeccable. But then local people are often left uncovered in these areas. So there does exist a gap, and this gap speaks volumes about the operations and the businesses. Then again, I would like to add that in my opinion, security frameworks and security protocols do not travel well beyond certain borders. Things which are considered very standardized in very developed markets may not be very practical and would be unable to be imposed in areas which have weak jurisdiction, where there is no weaker jurisdiction, where there is low oversight over these things. And then again, I would like to add in the end that security is identity-based as well for us. In the areas which are very, social fabric is very weak, then there are identities which are based on gender, ethnicity, nationality, which are very vulnerable. So as Mike has said, that we have a global workforce which is very diverse. So it's very difficult to customize or tailor security protocols for every nationality, even every ethnicity. But then again, since politically volatile world, we need to understand that security is a two-way street. The employees need to know where they need to have a situational awareness, as well as the corporate leadership needs to understand what they are venturing into.
Yeah, you raised some really good points. I think we can sit in the West and we can implement frameworks, and we all know that as you move around the world, those frameworks don't necessarily legally fit. There are requirements, and I think it's everyone in this room can do. Budget always comes down to a security department. We've all said today we're all being asked to do more with less, and that's a pretty good segue to you, Eitan, is to talk through the whole technology piece. We've heard today from so many people that the impact of AI. We heard on the last panel about AI in some ways caught us by surprise. Were we ready for it? And then there's this drive. I know that we're driving it. I work heavily in the event spaces. How can we use technology to improve our events, our fan experience, and also the safety? What's your experience with the push from businesses to go to the tech way? at the risk of the physical security of the traveller?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. Just by way of context, I'm a geopolitical risk consultant, but also a public safety advisor. I've been a medic, firefighter, and search and rescue officer for the past 20 years. So on the one hand, I have one foot in the world of strategy, but the other hand on frontline life-saving. And so I work with governments and corporates on emergency preparedness and mapping risks. And there's a huge trend towards technology. I mean, how much did we hear about technology and AI today? And it's extremely, extremely important. But at the end of the day, I'm a firefighter, right? I go into a burning building. I just have an axe and a hose. It doesn't matter whether I have a fancy FLIR thermal camera and the command post has all this advanced technology. At the end of the day, in a real crisis, we're really stripped to the bare bones, and that's our bodies and our brains, right? The best AI monitoring tools for our cameras are nothing more than this watch, right? Once this watch comes off, I'm still left by myself to deal with the crisis. So we have AI that can help identify threats sooner. We have technology that can monitor threats online faster. But we still need to remember to invest in human capital. Human capital to decide what to do with this information, who knows how to act quickly in a time of crisis. But also maybe think about how we prepare the human capital at the employee level to deal with an emergency on their own, right? On average, it takes emergency services 8 minutes to arrive to an incident. How do we as a company manage ourselves for those 8 minutes until they arrive? All the technology in the world is not going to teach my employee how to do CPR. They're not going to teach my secretary how to put on a tourniquet. And so we can't forget, even as we step foot into the digital age, and as Professor John said, the poly-threat environment, which isn't going anywhere, we need to remember that low-tech and human capital and knowledge are still at the tactical level, right? To go back to your pyramid, we can't forget the tactical level at the end of the day is just people and whatever they can find around them in a time of crisis.
Yeah, you raise a really good point. And Mike, I'll just bounce it to you from a cultural perspective. With such a huge workforce that you had, we heard about the Gen Y, the Gen Z, the old people like me who, technology is never quick there, is how do we roll out these training programs? I mean, we have all these safety apps, we're sending out communication, but at the end of the day, if the phone network goes down and we can't get that messaging out, I mean, in your experience, how do we get these training programs out and how do we make our staff feel safer?
I was actually just thinking about that as Eitan was saying that, because we've all experienced where we have something like Everbridge or a mass communication application, and when the crisis happens, like say the port blast in Lebanon, or there's frequent power outages in Lagos. I mean, when the GSM network goes down, oftentimes these systems fail. So how are we preparing from a duty of care perspective? How are we educating our employees and making them aware of what needs to take place? I think what works for us is, I think it goes back to the presentation this morning where he referenced ESRM and kind of like linking everything together. I mean, good intelligence monitoring, so being proactive. I can't say that, with such a large disparate workforce that we're able to conduct effective training all the time. But for instance, today, with Pakistan, India situation, you see an emerging risk that may happen, you get in front of that specific country team and the population it may impact, and we do refresher training. And we've done that successfully for every crisis from the last few years. And that could go down to like, what are we going to do if communication fails, loss of contact? How are we going to show up at your door potentially with a security vendor to evacuate you without you knowing in advance? And how do you know it's from us? So we go through, and it's unfortunately in this dynamic region that we're in, it's a well-tread practice. So it's something that we do well, and that's what we're going to be doing for our Pakistan team later today. But in every crisis we've experienced over the last few years, that's really worked to get their attention that, before that crisis hits, if you can. Or then there's an example from Kazakhstan way back before the Ukraine war started. If people remember in January, early January, right after New Year's, when that crisis in Kazakhstan seemingly came out of nowhere and the communication networks did go down, the government throttled back the communication. We take lessons learned from that. For instance, we found that SIM cards from other countries actually worked in Kazakhstan at that time, even though the government mobile networks were down. And we're able to relay communication via a colleague who is on work travel to Uzbekistan to the country team and maintain accountability and information that way. So we bring those lessons learned forward to train our workforce and make sure that they're also responsible for communicating with security and being ready for these crises when they strike, whether it's on business travel or otherwise.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, isn't it, around networks, and as we get more diverse, we go somewhere and we think that the mobile phones are always going to connect and we can do as many tests as we can, and we usually do the tests on the phones where the system was created, not tests on the SIM cards. Eitan, you're looking at me as I'm sure you've got a, you must see it with all the travel that you do and the crises that you're in is you said that 8 minutes where people have got to do it. We're all security professionals. We're very lucky to have dealt with crisis, and hopefully we come with a calm approach. But your average person on the street is not going to be that calm. And I think it's the education piece, isn't it? And Nabia, going back to you gave a really good point about the regional disparities of that. It's from the education from the start, isn't it? We have these workforces. Often they can be project workers. They're not permanent employees. They're not under contract with us. They're coming in as supply workers. Has there been anything that you have been able to resonate with from the intelligence perspective that you have recommended to your company about how you get that messaging out to your staff from a training standpoint? And to fit the region, I think, is more than anything else.
I think I have, as I've just mentioned, that security must be two-way street. We need to understand this, as well as the leadership, corporate leadership, which is moving into these fragile areas. They need to understand the cultural context of the areas they are going into. They need to have an understanding what they are expanding them into. They need to understand the local, at times, how the local legal system works. They need to have local partnerships understood. So just educating yourself about the area which you are venturing into would add on to a lot of things which can be resolved. So that is it. I think educating
I think
yourself.
just to add to Nabia's point is, yes, employers have duty of care, but travelers especially have duty of loyalty. So we see a lot of travelers are booking outside of normal booking tools because it's cheaper, right?
Yeah.
And we are all scrunching, looking for money, the budgets are cut and tightened up. So people are, booking outside the policy, booking outside the booking tools. What they don't know is that we cannot see where they travel. We cannot protect them. We cannot check in with them when something, happens. We're not aware where the employees are traveling. And it's hard to predict as well the traveling population to the countries they go to. So yes, they have a duty of loyalty to inform us if they're booking outside of those policies and procedures so that we are able to provide the support when needed and communicate with them.
Yeah, amazing point. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left. So each of you, in less than 10 words, okay, and I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong. Okay, can you describe what you would like to see happen in the next 12 months, so before we all meet here again, to address what can be seen as sometimes an opposition between operational necessity and the safety of our global workforce? And who wants to start? I'll start this end. Egle, you go.
Yeah, of course. I would like you to see that it shouldn't be a false choice whether you choose, continue the operations or choose prioritize employee safety. It should be a combination of both.
Nabia?
I would love to be part of conversations which would treat security as more of a multidisciplinary subject rather than thinking of it as in just purely data terms or intelligence terms. It is to understand it more from that perspective.
Eitan?
So again, going back to Professor John's chart of the strategic, operational, and technical, as the solutions you asked me about technology earlier are coming out that address the top two layers, I just need to make sure we don't forget the tactical level, the employee level. What do employees do when they're on their own in a crisis, to make sure that we empower them with education, with training, with basic knowledge?
For me, I think it's simple. I think a step back to review our policies in post-COVID working ways of work, to have clearly defined duty of care policies that take into account these gray areas, and let the employees know where the company's duty to respond or duty of care is and where that risk is on them. That's what I would like to be a year from now.
Yeah, +1 with Mike too on that one. Two of us.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left, a few seconds left rather. Any questions from the audience? Not that I can see. Doesn't look like it. Okay, we did a great job. Thanks very much to the panel. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. So thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you.